Good afternoon and welcome to the Construction Cashflow podcast live streaming today on this Wednesday afternoon. And today I've got Craig Alexander-Rattray with me from Know Your Numbers. Know Your Numbers are the sponsor of Construction Cashflow. And today we're going to talk about cash flow at this time of year, coming up to December in the construction industry. Many businesses have a couple of weeks off. So how do you manage your cash coming up to this time of year on a seasonal basis? And how do you finish strongly and start the new year? How do you finish strongly and start the new year strongly? So Craig, welcome and good afternoon. How are you doing today?
Hi, Stu.
We seem to have
Good afternoon.
lost
Always a
sound for Craig. Hey, great. Craig, so coming up to Christmas is a time when construction companies are often, I can hear him quite well now. So this is the joy of live.
It says my device
and
device unexpectedly stopped. Just what you need in a live, Stu.
It has to be, doesn't it? Yeah. So we live and learn, and we'll make those little tweaks as we go along. But all adds to the entertainment, doesn't it? That's the thing. So Craig, what would your ideas, your thoughts be and advice be to some of the construction industries that are facing stress, companies that are facing stress coming up to Christmas? Are they going to get their payments in? What can they do better to ensure they've got a proper strategy for cash flow at these kind of seasonal times when we have a couple of weeks off?
It is hard, Stu. It's hard any time, particularly in the construction sector at the moment, because people will make any excuse whatsoever not to pay, and even if they are paying, they'll make some other excuse to actually try and pay you less as well. So it's an ongoing challenge, this, and it gets exacerbated towards this end of the year because sites are closing down, people are going on holiday. There's a bit of a hiatus for a couple of weeks where there's no activity, so cash isn't being generated. So I say people will use any excuse not to pay you, and I suppose it goes back to where I like my clients to operate. Is where we've got good up to date information, so we know where we are, we know where we've been, and more importantly, we know where we're going, and that's where the forecast comes in, and whether that's a longer term monthly profit and loss account and balance sheet and cash flow forecast sitting alongside a rolling weekly cash flow forecast, and whether that's on some sort of Excel spreadsheet or it's using Float or some app like that, then you need that so you can actually look out and you can see, right, we're in 2 weeks before Christmas, whatever day it was, then 11th of December, so we can see 11th, 18th, 25th, then further out, so we know what needs to be paid in terms of our salaries, weekly wages or direct debits and things that need to go out. So we should then be able to identify what the funding gap is there, and ideally we should know who's expected to pay us and when. And what I've been doing with clients over the last couple of weeks is just making sure that we are right on that we know how much we need to collect over the course of the next 2, 3, 4 weeks to get through this period. We're in discussions with funders where we've got some shortfalls, but we're also calling clients, customers earlier to say, you've got a payment of X due on such and such a date. Any issues? Can we expect it? And some of my clients still have people that pay them by check. Why? I have no idea. Well, actually, that's not true. I do know why they pay by check, because it means they can delay it and the check's in the post and all of that sort of stuff. So it's not quite right what I'm saying. But what I'm saying to clients is, okay, if they say they're going to pay you by check on the 18th, let's tell them we'll go and collect a check. Let's call their bluff on that. We will send someone on site and collect the check. And really, that's all you can do, Stu. I keep saying that to people about credit control. It's your cash. Chase it. Pick up the phone. Pick up the phone and say, you owe me X. Why have you not paid yet? It's reasonably simple because people often will pay you, or at least you'll know where you stand on that basis. And if you think about it, if someone's got £100,000 in the bank and they've got 2 payments of £100,000 to make, and one person's chasing, another one isn't, I'm fairly sure I know where they're going to make the payment. So you've got to help yourself in all of this. You've got to be proactive. You've got to be looking forward, and you've got to be on top of your clients.
Yeah, exactly that. And I used to feel that awkward about phoning a client that you're building a relationship, a working relationship with, and then all of a sudden you're phoning them for money, and if they're late for money. And I always used to feel that might affect the relationship, and maybe
But but see, that's the key word for me here. That it's about relationships. And if you've got the relationship with your customer that says, right, I will do this work for you, you will pay me X, and you will pay me on such and such a date. Okay, that's an agreement you've got. So if you carry out your bit and you do that part, do what you've said, then if you have the right relationship and they're honourable people and people with integrity, then they will pay you, or they should pay you what you've said and pay you when they've said. And it's a big problem we have in construction, as you know, because what tends to happen is, I try and choose my words carefully, but you know that I normally just come out and say what I feel like anyway, right? But the big guys just beat up the small guys, right? We all know what happens, right? That's what happens. And as I've said before, it's just a horrible way to do business, because the big guys in general, I'm sure there are some exceptions, so I'll apologise to anyone who's offended that don't do this. But in general, the big guys will seek to find any excuse to delay payment, and they'll seek to find any excuse to pay you less. Right? You hear all these stories about pay less notices and significant amounts, and cash being pushed out. And these guys operate on it's a zero sum game. So basically, for them to win, somebody has to lose. Right? That's no basis for a relationship. That's no basis for working going forward. And I encourage my clients to have relationships with their customers so that we don't have situations like that. Because if you're in a proper relationship, you're in a proper business relationship, dealing with people with honesty and integrity, then there shouldn't be issues like that. And if there are issues like that, well, it's quite simple. You don't do work for them again. And as I've said before, you get what you tolerate. So if you keep working for someone and they pay you 70% of what you've asked for, and they pay you 90 days rather than 30 days, but you keep doing work for them and you do more projects and you do more projects, what are the chances of them changing on the basis that you're allowing them to do that and you're tolerating it? They're not going to change. The only way they will ever change is if you actually draw a line and say, no, you're paying me X and you're paying it on that day. If you don't, I'm not doing any more work. And until the industry in general stands up and does that, then the big guys will just keep beating down on people, because there's always going to be someone who'll do it cheaper and they'll do it for longer, longer cash flow.
Yeah, so I think it's just really, it's part of it is about the technicalities of having the right cash flow, doing the right predictions, being on top of your cash. And the other one I find, talking to small construction company owners, is around their confidence in dealing with these guys, and sometimes they feel that they don't want to upset the bully. Typical example, I spoke to a specialist contractor who really needed to chase his money because it was due. And he says, well, I'm not sure. I might just leave it a week because I don't want them to think that I'm desperate. I don't want them to think I'm desperate, because the next thing they'll come back at me with is, oh, have you got cash flow problems then? You've got problems, and then it goes down that route.
Yeah. But if you go back to what I said at the start, if you said you're going to do X for someone and you'll do the job and it's paid by that certain date, you're basically just saying to them, okay, you said you would pay me X for doing that work on this date. Then, the money's now due. Now, if they are honest and they act with integrity and you've got that relationship with them, then there should be no issue chasing that money. I don't see why there should ever be an issue, because you've done the work, and if you've done the work well, then you should be paid for it, and you should be paid on time. And I think key words here today: relationship, and one you've just said as well, confidence. You've got to have the confidence to push back. The client I started working with a couple of years ago, and like that, he never had the confidence to push back in terms of pricing or conditions or payment, and lots of different things. And it was only when he started pushing back, because you only need to do it once, right? You do it once and you've got the confidence to do it again, unless it really scares you and you just run away, right? Which is another option. But if you do that once, right, and the world doesn't fall apart, and they actually say, yeah, you're right, actually, we will pay you a wee bit more, because that, and we will pay you on time, right? It gives you the confidence to do it more. Now, at the end of the day, do you want to have customers who pay you low margin prices with very poor cash flow, and do you want to tolerate that? Or do you want to go and get proper relationships with people who you can actually do things together with, make it a win-win for both parties? Because ultimately, if you think about it, if the big guys keep beating down on their subbies, as we know, those subbies will no longer be there. They will disappear and they'll keep disappearing. Now, there's always someone who will pop up and do it cheaper, and that's maybe the approach they have. But I think it works much better where you're working regularly for someone. They know you, they know your people, know what you can do, and you just keep doing the work and you churn it and you both make money. Because there's got to be something in it for everybody. Otherwise, why do it?
Absolutely. And it's getting everyone on the same page. Why are we all here in the first place? What's the common goal that we've got to get this job finished? Beyond even the construction, who are we building this building for? What is it that we're going to contribute to the community? And so getting people on the same page, and coming back to what you said about, this was our agreement in the first place. That's absolutely crucial, isn't it? Because you can refer back to it, and sometimes small business owners, they don't actually have that agreement. There's nothing really set in stone. It's a bit of a moving, so they've got nothing to then call them up and say, I'll just following up that payment, John. We had this agreement that was, this was my terms, and this is what I'm, this is how we price the job. This is what we're operating on. Can you get it processed? Whereas if you haven't got that, you can't really, you haven't got the thing to fall back on. And then you've got no confidence, and you're getting triggered all the time. And the only way you're going to end up is in an argument. So I hear what you're saying. It's very, very important to draft those initial agreements, isn't it?
Again, I would point the finger at the subcontractor who's doing that work. Right, you're leaving yourself wide open if you don't say, right, here's what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to do X, Y, Z. I'm going to do it within this time scale, and here's the costs. And then you're going to pay me. Now, if you don't document that, I've got zero sympathy for you, right? Because it's common sense. You've got to do that, right? And I'm not one for big long agreements. I'm very much a handshake guy. But you do need to document these things, and you can then follow up on that, as need be.
So going into next year and thinking about how business is going to plan their year from a financial perspective. Sometimes a business owner, a small specialist subcontractor, or it could be a small contractor, the business owner is very heavily into the other parts of the business. So ensuring the guys are on site, ensuring he's got his materials, ensuring the quality is right, looking after the health and safety. And quite often the projecting the cash flow is maybe at the back of his mind, but not at the fore of his mind. So it gets pushed back, it gets pushed back, it gets pushed back. But without having his finger on the pulse there, he may eventually go out of business, because it's the cash flow that puts people out of business, isn't it? What could he do to ensure that he's, like you mentioned earlier, about making sure you've got a weekly cash flow, a monthly cash flow, quarterly cash flow, yearly cash flow? What can he do to ensure that he's hitting those targets?
There you go. See, here's the one I prepared earlier. It's sitting on the other side of my screen. Right. So you'll actually get this on the Know Your Numbers website. No one will be able to read it, but it's quite simple. So there's three segments to that circle. One segment is basically knowing where you are. So you got to know where you are from a financial perspective. So you need to have up to date management accounts and related information, key performance indicators, that type of thing. The part next to that is where you've been. So that's looking back, your historic accounts, making sure your historic accounts are all up to date, they're posted, they're filed, your taxes all up to date. Because that's your starting point for anything, right? And that should be reasonably easy to do. As I keep saying, even some accountants can do that, right? The more the more challenging part is the looking forward part, is the forecasting, right? But at the end of the day, you need to know where you are to have that starting point for your forecast, and you need to know where you've been to allow you to generate the assumptions to help you forecast out where you're going. So they are key parts to it. And I keep saying, for me, the most important finance person in any business is the bookkeeper, who's doing all the day-to-day processing, so that everything's up to date. So you know exactly where you are, and then you're basically forecasting out. It's as simple as that. And I do feel for owner-managed businesses who are heavily operational, because most of these guys have never been taught about finance, about accounts, about dealing with banks, about funding, anything like that, and they've sort of learned as they've gone along. And as you know, what we're trying to do here, Stu, is we're trying to educate people in terms of helping them with their cash flow. And in order to do that, they need to help themselves in certain respects by having real-time, up-to-date information, making sure everything's done properly, and then looking forward at what's going to happen. And it's we don't have a crystal ball in terms of well, actually, I do actually have a crystal ball sitting on my desk, funnily enough. But we don't. But we, in general, we don't. But it doesn't tell me where we're going, right? In terms of what work and what business we're going to do. So we need to make certain assumptions to allow us to forecast out. And as I say, that we make the assumptions based on things that have happened to us historically, and based on what our order book is, or what projects we've got, and we then forecast that forward. Because if you don't do that, you can't possibly know how much cash or working capital you need over the course of the next, whether it's 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, or 3 years. You just don't know. You've got to do that. And that's what causes a lot of people to have the cash flow headaches, because they're not doing that. And it's reasonably simple to put all of that in place. And the added advantage is, if you follow what's in that framework, above my head, you can then engage with funders. So you can go to banks, financial institutions, and you can get the right type of funding. Because basically, what does a funder need to know to help you? The funder needs to know where you are, where you've been, and where you're going. And if you can present that information to them and tell them how much you need, what you're going to do with it, and where you're going to get to, you'll have the meeting out your hand all day long, because it's about making their job easy to help you. Because banks do want to help you. Banks only make money if they lend to you. If they sit in their hands, they don't make anything. But they want to lend to people who are a good risk, who've got a good business, and they know exactly what they're doing. So anyone who's in that operational role where they're not really paying attention to the financial side, get yourself a good bookkeeper, get the online accounting done, get it done, on a daily basis. If you're bigger, make sure you're doing monthly management accounts, and make sure you've got a forecast in place, and get yourself someone who can help you on an ongoing basis. And that may be your accountant. If you're a bit bigger, it might be a part-time finance director, chief financial officer, something like that, because you've got to do that, and it will take away the stress in the business. I've seen that with many clients, where they've, typically people come to me when they've got lots of opportunities, but they can't do anything with them because they've got no cash. They can't pay their suppliers. They can't pay themselves. But they've got all of this. They're making lots of profit, but they've no cash. And they then realise that profit is not the same as cash. But if you've got all of that, you can then go to the fund and get it funded by producing that right information. So I've had guys who were turning over between $500,000 and $1 million who are now doing 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 million pounds, because they've got the right funding in place. And they've been able to take advantage of those opportunities. So see something like that as an investment, and look at, if you're turning over £1 million and making, a 30% gross profit, right? What would putting the right funding in place mean to you to allow you to do another £1 million? It would generate you another £300,000 of gross profit. Now, you're not going to pay that to an accountant, a finance director, or various other people in banks, for the cost of that. So you're going to be making significantly more profit. You just need to understand that, and that's where the whole know your numbers things comes in as well, where you can understand that, and you can put that in place and just make a lot more money, and you no longer need to worry about cash. It generally, I know you're smiling. It's simple, Stu. It really is.
Yeah, it's so fundamental, isn't it? So and I think what you're saying, if you don't like the numbers yourself, if you don't, you're more of an ops man or ops woman, and get someone in who can sort this out for you, or a CFO, somebody that likes the numbers, that can report to you, so that you've got your finger on the pulse on your weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly basis. And I think that's really important. And I like what you said about the idea of funding to grow. to looking for have the right information in place that you can then make conscious decisions about funding to scale the business. And I think there's a lot of small business owners that don't look at it like that. They say, oh, we're not going to borrow any money. The business has got to wipe its own nose, and actual fact, it's kind of, I see there's merits in that statement, but also it means that you're missing out on what you could be doing if you knew your numbers.
It depends what you want to do. If you want to have a business that stays the same and you have a very stress-free life and you're making enough money to keep it, then that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Let's got a lifestyle business. Nothing wrong with that at all. Right? But if you're ambitious and you've got people knocking your door down, say, look, we want you to do more, and you're turning over 500,000, 1 million, right? And you've got all these people saying, right, here's another project for 500,000, here's a couple of hundred, right? Then surely you want to take advantage of those opportunities. And in doing all these things right from a financial perspective, you will be able to do that. I've got guys who are now making 10, almost 20 times the profit they were making 2-3 years ago because they've put the right funding in place. And you know what? They no longer sit on a Saturday night when they're out for dinner with their partner and they worry about cash. They don't even think about cash because it's all running. I mean, the biggest concern most of them have is they're complaining that the tax bill's too high. Right. That's which is fine. As I keep saying to people, you should aspire to have a big tax bill because it means you're making a lot of money.
Yeah, but absolutely. What would you say to a business owner? Because one thing I've noticed, one habit that I've noticed in a lot of, particularly specialist contractors, is that they don't necessarily separate out their operation account, their business, for their business overheads, etc., and their project accounts. The money all comes into the same pot, and then they may have several contracts on the go, several projects on the go at the same time. And what they're doing is they're robbing Peter to pay Paul. And then once they have a problem on one, the dominoes affects. They get the domino effect, which happens quickly. Well, what advice would you give someone in that mindset?
I don't think you necessarily need different bank accounts for them. It depends the size of your business. If you're talking tens of millions, then fine, okay, I can understand that. But if you're a business turning over, 500,000, million up to 10 million, then no, you don't need separate bank accounts. But you do need to be collating the information in terms of what each project's making. That's key. You need to be managing that, because at the end of the day, if you've got a big pot that says, right, we've made X for the year, right, but you've not split it out, you don't know. Now, if you've got 10 projects that make you X, you don't know whether all those 10 projects are making you money or some are losing you money. So you've actually got to break it down by each one. You need to be collating each one and managing each one. And particularly in construction, a lot of people, what they try to do is run it almost as a mini business. Each project is a mini business. So we should be generating profit. You should be generating cash flow from it as well. Often difficult generating cash flow from it as well at the start, but it's certainly a good way to look at it. And if you've got project managers or contract managers, that should be their task to manage that project. And we should basically make sure that the information is feeding into the operational system / accounting system to allow you to then review it. And you should be reviewing that regularly. And I like project managers, contract managers to be reviewing it on a weekly basis and comparing it against the budget. If you've got, when it's a 6-month project, a 26-month project, we know exactly what we're supposed to be doing each month. So we should be looking at where are we compared to where we said we would be, both on a monthly basis and cumulatively, labor, materials, overheads, all that type of stuff. And as you know, I'm not aware of too many projects that basically come forward. There doesn't seem to be many of them. It's always things being pushed back, but you need to know where you are, because if you're 50% through a project that's running fairly evenly and you've spent 70% of the material cost and the labor cost, then you've got a problem. And you want to know that early. You want to be doing something about that quickly. And it may actually not be your problem in the sense that you may have done additional work because the scope's changed. And that goes back to making sure you've got these things documented, variations. Don't do anything on site until you've got a signature from someone that says what you've to do. Otherwise, the chances are you probably won't get paid further down the line, or certainly not get all of it. So again, look after yourself. Do the right things for your business. But monitor projects on a project by project. You will then know what you're making on them, and you'll understand what sort of margins you're making from different clients and customers.
That's very good advice, and I think that that separates out those businesses that become successful and those that are not successful. And even so, like you said, if you've spent 70% of your income, your finances on materials and labor, you're halfway through, and the other risk that comes up, and particularly in this economic climate, is that your main contractor goes bust. And then you're left, you're left high and dry, aren't you? So there's other risks involved as well.
And you've got, and that's where you can start thinking about credit insurance. So you can start insuring your debtors as well. There's various different organisations can do that for you. If you're working on a project or working for a particular client, and them not paying you would bring down your business, that's a massive risk to your business. That's one you really need to be thinking about seriously. Should you be doing the work in the first place? And then secondly, do you need to insure it, or do you need to be spreading that risk in some way? You've got to be looking at, and again, that goes back to, if you don't know your numbers on these things, you're probably not going to be aware of that. And if you're not forecasting your cash, then you don't know these things.
Yeah. So for listeners, construction managers, construction business owners, subcontractors that may be listening in, if they wanted to know more about their numbers, find out more, how could they get in touch with you around know your numbers and gaining that mastery of their numbers?
Well, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Craig Alexander Rattray, and if you want to go to the Know Your Numbers website, it's knowyournumbers.biz. And on there's a lot of articles. You'll see the framework. There's a lot of blogs, articles. There's also a training academy there that's got about 70 short videos, anything from half a minute to 3 minutes, and it covers things like profit and loss accounts, balance sheets, EBITDA, gross profit, funding. There's a whole variety of things you do that, and we're running different groups as well that run over a period of time. So Know Your Numbers Mastery. We've got a Know Your Numbers construction group launching Q1 next year, and there's a few other related things as well. So there's also a lot of help. A lot of people want to help people in the construction sector. I want to try and help educate people and explain these things to them, and just make people aware of the things they should be doing, or things they should at least be thinking about. Just because I say it doesn't make it right, but I know a lot of this stuff works for me and for my clients.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Craig. And it's been a pleasure speaking to you as always. So if you're listening in and there's any particular part of this conversation that you'd like to know more about, get in contact with Craig. And if there's any particular subjects relating to knowing your numbers or construction cash flow that you'd like us to discuss in a future episode live stream, we'll be happy to address those particular points. So thank you for listening. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, Craig. And we'll look forward to the next live stream where we'll have more discussion, more insights into knowing your numbers and construction cash flow. Thanks very much. Have a lovely afternoon.
Thanks, Stu.